I, female 26, have been married to my husband, male 29, for almost 4 years and have a great relationship and rarely ever fight. The only problem I have is that my husband never plans dates. I always look for events, farmers markets, plan double dates, vacations, and pretty much include him in every aspect of my life. Apart from my birthdays, he doesn't plan anything. He's never even booked a plane ticket once in our entire relationship. I plan all the vacations. Now, I fully believe in maintaining independence and having our own lives in relationships. I have lots of hobbies and occasionally go on outings with my girlfriends, but I always communicate this with him. And I always avoid weekends because that's our time together. His weekdays are fully booked, and we rarely spend time together because he works 9, 5, plays volleyball, has a run club, and likes to go on solo runs and bike rides, all of which I'm not invited to. He'll say, "You can come if you want, if I bring anything up," but not a true invitation, of course. Lately, he's been making Saturday plans fully without me and doesn't communicate. The other day, he left in the morning when I was still sleeping, went on a bike ride through the city, and I didn't hear from him until dark. Last night, Friday, he mentioned he'd be meeting friends for volleyball later in the day, but it wouldn't take a long time, that I could come if I want. But when I woke today, he was already gone. No text or nothing. It's about 4:30 p.m., and I still haven't heard any updates. And I'm 99% sure that I won't hear from him or see him until around bedtime. All I want are texts saying, "Hey baby, you were sleeping." So I headed to the park to play volleyball. "Why don't you meet us there? Or if you don't want to, come get dinner with us." But I don't hear anything at all. When I bring this up to him, he always resorts to, "You're always invited if you want to come though. It's not my fault you never want to come." He doesn't understand that's not a true invitation. And since there's a group of people he's making these plans with, I don't feel welcome and don't want to intrude. And no matter how much I explain the difference between true quality time versus being physically together with other people, he still doesn't get it. To add to this, we recently moved and I've had trouble making true friends, so I am pretty lonely. I pretty much revolve my world around him. Yet I feel like a side character in his life. Our marriage is nearly perfect, except for the lack of planning on his end. When we do go on dates that I planned, we always have so much fun together. And our life together at home is very loving as well. He's a great husband apart from this. So, am I wrong to feel upset? Almost forgot. We had the discussion and he admitted he got used to me being the planner. That I've been the planner since early in our relationship, so he doesn't think to plan dates because he knows I will. It was difficult for him to understand that I'm not asking him to stop hanging out with his friends and that I'm not asking him to change his life. He couldn't really understand that I'm not asking for more last-minute invitation to his friends' gatherings, that I want to either be included from the start and fully integrated into his friend groups or not invited at all. He thinks our love languages are different, that I value quality time more than he does. So I really don't think he notices when I plan 50 dates in a row, and he's planned none. I don't think he notices when we haven't spent quality time together in 2 weeks. I don't think it's out of spite or lack of love, but simply unawareness because quality time isn't something he cares about as much. I think he's used to me being around all the time at home and takes me for granted. It's a work in progress. Thanks for all the advice. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. If you're putting in the effort to spend time together and he's putting in none, you have a problem. You can try spelling it out. The way he says it makes it feel very much like you are not actually welcome to come. Furthermore, the way he's planning it and the way he says it makes you feel like an afterthought. And since he does things like leave while you are asleep, it really makes you feel like he does not want you there. Use I statements. Ask him to hear you out before interrupting, especially for excuses. I would also make it clear that it makes you feel bad when he never specifically plans anything for you two as a couple or saves time for you. That this is happening frequently is not great, and it really does give off a vibe that he does not actually enjoy spending time with you. In short, if he wants the marriage to work, he needs to put effort into the marriage. However, on your end, you can only communicate this and decide what you are willing to tolerate. Comment 2. I'm sorry about what you're going through. This is likely bad advice, but in my life experience, sometimes I've had to match the same energy given to me to get my point across. Especially if you've tried communicating your feelings about these half-hearted invites, and nothing changes. Start doing things without him and have your own social life. Don't tell him what you're doing on the weekends, since he does the same thing to you. Let's see if he understands the full weight of his behavior when it happens to him. If he has a clue, he'll start to notice the same kind of energy and confront you about it, in, which you could say, well, I'm just doing what you're doing, which is leaving me out of your plans and doing your own thing, so I'm going to do my own thing. Sounds petty, yeah. But sometimes stooping down to the same person's level was the only way to get the message across. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, after our last conversation, things didn't really change much. My husband continued with his usual routine, and I kept feeling more and more like an afterthought. On Saturday, he left early again without a word. I woke up to an empty house and spent the day alone, trying to keep myself busy. I went to a local cafe, did some shopping, but the loneliness was overwhelming. By the time he got home, it was late and he was exhausted. We barely exchanged a few words before he went to bed. The next day, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I planned a surprise picnic at a nearby park. I packed all his favorite foods, brought a blanket, and even picked up some flowers. I thought maybe if I showed him how much effort I was putting in, he'd understand. When he got home from his run, I excitedly told him about the picnic. He seemed indifferent, but agreed to go. At the park, he was on his phone most of the time, texting his friends about their next volleyball game. I felt like I was competing for his attention and losing. Monday was no different. He went to work, and I spent the day trying to make new friends. I joined a local book club, hoping to find some companionship. The women there were nice, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was just filling a void. When my husband got home, he mentioned he had plans to go biking with his friends the next day. I asked if I could join, and he gave me the usual, "You can come if you want" response. I decided to go, hoping it would be different this time. Tuesday came, and we went biking with his friends. I tried to keep up, but they were all experienced bikers, and I struggled. My husband barely noticed my efforts, too engrossed in his conversations with his friends. I felt like an outsider, and it hurt. When we got home, I confronted him again. I told him how much it hurt to feel like I was always tagging along, never truly invited. He got defensive, saying he didn't understand why I couldn't just enjoy the activities with him and his friends. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying our conversations in my head, trying to figure out where things went wrong. I realized that I had been compromising my own happiness for the sake of our relationship. I had given up my hobbies, my friends, and my time, all to be with him. And in return, I felt neglected and unimportant. Wednesday was a turning point. I decided to take a step back and focus on myself. I went to a yoga class, something I used to love but had stopped doing. I felt a sense of peace and clarity that I hadn't felt in a long time. I realized that I needed to find my own happiness, independent of my husband. When I got home, I told him about my decision. He seemed surprised but didn't say much. Over the next few days, I started to reclaim my life. I reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies I had abandoned, and started to feel more like myself. My husband noticed the change but didn't seem to understand it. He continued with his routine and we grew more distant. By the end of the week, I felt a mix of emotions. I was proud of myself for taking control of my happiness, but I also felt a deep sadness. Our relationship was strained, and I didn't know if it could be fixed. I missed the closeness we once had, but I couldn't go back to feeling like a side character in his life. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, he finally brought it up. He asked why I'd been so distant lately. I told him everything, how I felt neglected, how I'd given up so much for our relationship, and how I needed to find my own happiness. He listened, but I could see the confusion in his eyes. He didn't understand why I couldn't just be happy with the way things were. That's when I realized that our love languages were fundamentally different. He valued his independence and hobbies, while I craved quality time and connection. It wasn't that he didn't love me, he just didn't understand my needs, and I couldn't keep compromising my happiness for the sake of our relationship. The next day, I made a difficult decision. I told him that I needed some space to figure things out. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend for a few days. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was necessary. I needed to find myself again and decide what I truly wanted. During those days apart, I had a lot of time to think. I realized that I had been so focused on making our relationship work that I had lost sight of my own needs and desires. I needed to find a balance between being a supportive partner and maintaining my own identity. When I returned home, we had a long talk. I told him that I loved him but needed to find a way to balance our needs. He agreed to try, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. We decided to take things one day at a time and see if we could find a way to make it work. It's been a challenging journey, and I don't know what the future holds. But I've learned that I need to prioritize my own happiness and not lose myself in the process. Our relationship may never be perfect, but I'm hopeful that we can find a way to make it work. Thanks for reading. Aita for feeling relieved. When my self-harming girlfriend left for Ukraine. I'm reaching out because I'm in a really tough spot and could use some advice. My partner, a 20-year-old female, and I, a 21-year-old male, have been together for 8 months. We're both in the same class at school and currently in the middle of exam period. She's a refugee from Ukraine, and I'm from Western Europe. When we started dating, everything seemed fine. We were both happy. I'm loud and active, while she's calm and quiet. I like to joke about anything and everything, but she has a different sense of humor and often gets offended by my jokes. For the first few months, this didn't cause major issues, and I did my best to avoid hurting her. However, as time went on, things changed. Many things I said hurt her deeply, and no matter how much I tried to adjust, there was always something new that caused her pain. It escalated to the point where she got upset almost daily over the things I did. But I often didn't realize I had done something wrong until it was too late. I always apologized and tried to clarify that I never intended to hurt her. But it seemed like nothing I did could make her happy. This became overwhelming for me, and I started to feel hopeless. I even cried every time I heard her again, begging her not to comfort me because I was supposed to comfort her. Some of the issues were seemingly minor, taking too long to reply because I was talking to my parents, someone else sitting next to me in class, or misreading her messages. I tried to stay calm, but sometimes I couldn't hold back and ended up telling her about the things she did that upset me, which only made things worse. I knew she had a history of psychological issues, including self-harm and an unalived attempt. A few weeks ago, after a fight, she cut herself. She told me it wouldn't have happened if I just apologized. It was the worst feeling I've ever had. I tried everything to support her and avoid doing anything wrong, but things returned to how they were before. Recently, during another fight, she hinted at self-harm again. I dropped my own feelings immediately to prevent it. A week later, after another argument, I suggested minimal contact for a week to prevent more fights, since I was at a complete loss as to how I could fix this. But she said it would only make things worse. We agreed to use "I feel" statements to avoid fights. A few days later, she said "good night" without any emojis or context because she was hurt by something I said and I got upset, feeling she broke our agreement. This led to another fight. She cut herself again. I drove to her as fast as I could after she called me. I bandaged her wound but had to take her to the emergency room. There, employees offered for her to have a talk with a psychiatrist, which she refused. When the staff was gone, I asked her once, "Are you sure you do not want to have a conversation?" She then changed her mind, and after she and I separately had a conversation with hospital staff, I had to leave her there for a couple hours since no visitors were allowed at night. The next day, social workers arranged to help her and were looking for a doctor that suited her needs. I felt hopeful that things would get better. But things only got worse. She accused me of forcing her to stay in the hospital, saying I made everything worse like always. She stated I caused all of this, that I've made her feel miserable and worthless, despite my efforts to make us both happy. I don't know what to do. I love her and don't want to leave, but I'm completely lost and overwhelmed. Things keep getting worse, and every day she reminds me that this is all my fault. I cannot handle these emotions. I still think about how I had to clean up her blood for close to an hour. I reached out to my psych, who is testing me for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and/or autism, who agreed to talk to me about the situation on the next test appointment. But that is only in several weeks. To add, thank you to everyone who responded. I had to leave out many details and only gave my point of view. I have acted wrong in many situations too, and do not blame her as a person. I blame the condition she is in now and know deep down that she is a good person. Sadly, we had more fights. I tried to explain that I am broken now too, and am not in a condition myself to support her. After a long conversation, we agreed to take a 5-week break. When exams are finished and she is back from Ukraine, we will talk again and see if there is a way for us to continue. During this break, we will focus on our own problems separately. We will only check in on each other from time to time and have a safe word, now that we must use any time we feel negative emotions due to the other. She will have a doctor's appointment in 2 weeks, and I will talk to a psychologist about the situation too. I wish I could support her now during her relapse of mental issues, but I myself am not in a condition where I can support her. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I have been in a straight copy of this relationship and I'm sorry, but leave now. This is psychological abuse and it will only escalate. She is not self-harming because of anything you have done. She is doing it because she knows she can control you with it. Nothing she is doing is your fault. You cannot and should not take the blame for her choices or actions. The longer you stay with her, the worse things will get and the harder it will be to get out. When you do finally come to the realization of what's happening and try to leave, you should fully expect her to escalate to the extremes. But for your sake, you can't give in. Leave while you can. Comment 2. This is abuse. But if it helps, I, a reformed self-harmer, and a person who has been committed for being suicidal, give you permission to break up with her. This is not healthy for you or her. Since you're both at school, see what mental health services are available. Let them know what's happening. But you cannot light yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments and support. So, during our break, I decided to focus on my exams and my own mental health. I thought the space would help both of us, but things took a turn I didn't expect. About 3 days into the break, I got a call from her. She was crying and said she felt completely alone and abandoned. I tried to remind her that we agreed on this break to help ourselves, but she kept saying she couldn't handle it. I felt torn because I wanted to help her, but I also knew I needed this time for myself. I ended up going over to her place that night. She was in a bad state and I could see she hadn't been taking care of herself. We talked for hours and she kept saying she needed me. I felt guilty for leaving her alone, so I decided to stay the night. The next morning, she seemed a bit better, but I was exhausted and behind on my studies. I knew I couldn't keep doing this, but I didn't know how to help her without sacrificing my own well-being. A few days later, she had her doctor's appointment. She was supposed to go alone, but she begged me to come with her. I had an important exam the next day, but I couldn't say no. At the appointment, the doctor suggested she start a new medication and attend regular therapy sessions. She seemed hopeful, but as soon as we left, she started doubting everything. She said the medication wouldn't work and that therapy was pointless. I tried to reassure her, but nothing I said seemed to help. That night, we had another fight. She accused me of not caring about her and only thinking about myself. I tried to explain that I was doing my best, but she wouldn't listen. She ended up cutting herself again, and I had to take her back to the hospital. This time, they admitted her for a few days to monitor her. I felt relieved that she was getting help, but I also felt guilty for feeling that way. While she was in the hospital, I tried to focus on my exams. I managed to get through them, but I was constantly worried about her. When she was discharged, she seemed better, but I knew it was only temporary. She started the new medication, but it would take weeks to see any real effects. In the meantime, she was still struggling, and I didn't know how to support her without losing myself in the process. One night, she called me in a panic. She said she couldn't handle the side effects of the medication and wanted to stop taking it. I tried to convince her to give it more time, but she was adamant. She stopped taking the medication, and things quickly went downhill. She became more anxious and depressed, and our fights became more frequent and intense. I reached out to my psychologist, who suggested I set some boundaries to protect my own mental health. I knew it was the right thing to do, but it felt impossible. Every time I tried to set a boundary, she would accuse me of not loving her and making her feel worse. I felt trapped and didn't know how to get out of this cycle. One night, after another intense fight, she told me she couldn't do this anymore. She said she needed to go back to Ukraine to be with her family. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. I knew she needed support, but I also knew that going back to Ukraine could be dangerous for her. I tried to convince her to stay, but she had already made up her mind. She left the next day, and I felt a mix of relief and guilt. I knew she needed her family, but I also felt like I had failed her. I tried to focus on my own recovery, but it was hard not to think about her and worry about her safety. I reached out to her a few times, but she didn't respond. I hoped she was okay, but I knew I had to let her go. In the weeks that followed, I tried to rebuild my life. I focused on my studies and my own mental health. I started seeing my psychologist regularly and began to understand my own issues better. I realized that I couldn't save her, and I needed to take care of myself first. Looking back, I can see how our different backgrounds and experiences made it hard for us to understand each other. She had been through so much trauma, and I didn't know how to help her without getting lost in the process. I still care about her and hope she finds the support she needs, but I know I need to focus on my own healing now. Thanks for reading. Aita for wanting to leave Alabama and my partner's financial secrets behind. I'm from North Carolina and have loved the mountains around. I moved to Alabama, Birmingham, for my partner a couple of months ago. Granted, I was gone for a month of that in total, to go pursue an adventure that I had already planned. In the beginning, I didn't think it was all bad in Birmingham. The little city is actually pretty cool, but the rest of Alabama is pretty terrifying and goes against all of my political and economic beliefs. My partner has a good job in Birmingham in a very niche field and is terrified to make a move, as he would likely take a pay cut. I'm visiting home this weekend and can't stand the thought of another day in Alabama. But I have to make a decision fast because my parents are planning to move the rest of my things down next weekend. I feel bad because me and my partner moved out of his apartment into a nicer place. And though it was okay for a while, I still don't like Alabama. I feel bad because it was an expensive move, and honestly, he probably took most of the hits financially, as I've been looking for jobs in Birmingham and haven't been offered a position yet. However, I did pay the security deposit. He isn't making me pay rent yet since I haven't found a job, which I'm appreciative of, but I still just can't fathom living in Alabama much longer. On the finances end, my partner makes about $70,000, and when I have a job, it typically pays $50,000. Before I moved to Birmingham, we were long distance, and I was paying rent and bills back in North Carolina. During that time, I was able to save lots of money for myself and my future. North Carolina is more expensive than Alabama. Every time my partner gets paid, I swear he's just completely broke and isn't able to save a thing. He blames it on inflation, but I know in my gut there's more. I know the move we made was expensive, but even before then, when he was in his cheap apartment before I ever moved in, it felt like he was always complaining about money, even though he makes more than the average person in Alabama. He also has some consumer debt and expensive hobbies. However, I have asked him how much these things cost him and how much he brings home every month. And something just isn't adding up. He should have more money even after all these bills. So I'm like, where's all this money going? However, he is kind and sweet and very attentive, and I love him. But I made the sacrifice to be with him in Alabama, and I don't like it, and his finances are scaring me. And he isn't willing to uproot his life like I did for him, so we can be happy elsewhere. He says he would love to move to North Carolina, but can't afford it and can't afford to not have his job. I'm unsure what I want to do because I love him. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. 16 years ago, I relocated from upstate NY to New Jersey for my partner. I tried so hard to like it here and make friends, but I am miserable. We own a home together, and with the economy the way it is and my age, I can't just quit my job and try again somewhere else. Don't get me wrong, my husband is a good guy, but I would give anything to go back in time and not move here. You're young. Don't put yourself in a situation when your intuition is telling you otherwise. I wish someone had said this to me back in 2008, because life is way too short to be this unhappy. Comment 2, if it's not an enthusiastic stay, it's a go. It sounds like you rushed into this move prematurely. That's okay, lesson learned. But I'd advise you to learn it while the consequences are still mild. and you can easily correct the mistake. Your financial situation in Alabama is so precarious. Don't wait for it to become disastrous before you decide you need out. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading. So, 3 months have passed since I last shared my dilemma about moving to Alabama for my partner. A lot has happened, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Right after my last update, I decided to have a serious conversation with my partner about our future. I told him how unhappy I was living in Alabama and how I felt like I had sacrificed a lot to be with him. He listened, but I could tell he was stressed about the whole situation. A week after that conversation, I got a job offer in Birmingham. It wasn't exactly what I wanted, but it was a decent position with a salary close to what I was making in North Carolina. I accepted the job, thinking that maybe having some financial independence would make things better. But even with the job, I still felt out of place in Alabama. The job itself was okay, but the environment and the people just didn't feel like home. Then, something unexpected happened. My partner got a call from a company in North Carolina offering him a job. It was in his field, but the pay was significantly lower than what he was making in Birmingham. He was torn because he knew how much I wanted to move back, but he was also worried about our financial stability. We spent days discussing the pros and cons, and it was clear that taking the job would be a huge risk. But I could see in his eyes that he was considering it because he knew how much it meant to me. During this time, I started noticing some strange behavior from my partner. He was more secretive about his finances and seemed stressed all the time. One night, I decided to confront him about it. After a lot of hesitation, he finally admitted that he had a gambling problem. He had been hiding it from me because he was ashamed and didn't want me to worry. This revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. It explained why he was always broke, despite his decent salary. We had a long and emotional conversation about his gambling. He promised to seek help, and even suggested attending therapy together to work through our issues. I was hurt and angry, but I also felt a sense of relief that the mystery of his finances was finally out in the open. We decided to put the North Carolina job offer on hold and focus on getting him the help he needed. Over the next few weeks, my partner started attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and we began therapy sessions. It was a tough period, but I could see him making an effort to change. Meanwhile, I was trying to adjust to my new job and make the best of our situation in Alabama. It wasn't easy, but I felt like we were making progress. Then, out of the blue, my parents called me with some news. They had decided to delay their move to Alabama because my dad got a temporary job assignment in North Carolina. This gave me some hope that maybe we didn't have to rush into any decisions and could take our time to figure things out. Around this time, my partner's company in Birmingham announced some layoffs. His job was safe, but it made him realize how unstable his situation was. This pushed him to reconsider the job offer in North Carolina. We talked about it again, and this time, he was more open to the idea. He had been doing well in his recovery, and we both felt like a fresh start in North Carolina could be good for us. We decided to take the plunge and accept the job offer in North Carolina. It was a huge risk, but we both felt like it was the right move. The next few weeks were pretty tough of packing, planning, and saying goodbye to the few friends we had made in Alabama. It was stressful, but there was also a sense of excitement about starting a new chapter. Moving back to North Carolina felt like coming home. My partner's new job was challenging, but he seemed happier and more relaxed. I found a job that I loved, and we started to rebuild our lives together. We continued therapy, and he kept attending his support group meetings. It wasn't always easy, but we were committed to making it work. Looking back, I realized that the move to Alabama and everything that followed was a test of our relationship. It forced us to confront some difficult truths and make some tough decisions. But in the end, it brought us closer together and made us stronger as a couple. Thanks for reading. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.